Hey guys, Rob from Georgia here with you, aka VHS82 apostrophe, with my ongoing X-Files episode. A closer look. Season 3, episode 19, Hell Money. Directed by Tucker Gates, most notably known for Bates Motel, 17 episodes worth of Bates Motel. And Jeff Vlaming, the writer, best known for 6 episodes of Hannibal. So, two pretty good credentials there. And the overall vibe of the episode reflects it. I gotta say right off the bat, though, all my hopes and prayers by now, of course, this is dropping a little after the fact, but I do live here in Georgia, and we were right in the pathway, which generally by the time hurricanes hit the panhandle, and if we're even in its path, they usually generally fizzle out by the time they reach us. I'm just north of Atlanta. This time, though, with the velocity of the hurricane, the strength of it, how quickly it's moving in and hitting land, we were quite expecting. First time living in Georgia, we're really expecting to wake up with no power for 2-3 days, if not more. Horrific wind damage and just a lot of stuff. But ultimately, thankfully, it did what they generally do. Well, it's not so much fizzling out as it veered right. And so we were by and large spared, never lost power, property intact, which really are the least of the things, right? But all my prayers, and with those in the immediate impact zone and along the coast that are feeling the brunt of it, this was not a nice storm. I think what they predicting 20 foot surges. I can't even fathom. Just to see some of the video footage is insane. So anyways, those aren't good. And so all of those people. But thankfully, I'm here doing an X-File review, right? And followed up by Walking Dead review. So life's okay when this suddenly then becomes the least of your issues. Anyways, Hell Money. Have you ever read the old short story, The Lottery, which, from that we get some offshoots like The Purge, or it's just sort of like that in a way. It's sort of like a lottery, and there's an interesting review at the end. A lottery for illegal organ, the proliferation of organ harvesting, right? Which sort of, we'll see again. Probably see it multiple times throughout the X-Files, actually. But I want to believe the second theatrical film. And so, you kind of have this thing going on, and it really is devoid of any supernatural element. This is really, earthly based, and but it's terrifying. It's really terrifying. You got a group of core characters, the first of which you meet is Johnny Lowe, played by Derek Lowe. His fate ultimately ends up being within, a fiery furnace of sorts. I'm not really sure what that is. We'll know more later. But we come to find out via a couple characters, Detective Glen Chao, played by B.D. Wong, who is assisting Scully and Mulder in this. There's been a rash series of bodies that have gone through fiery furnaces, and this is sort of how I was about to say Hannibal, why Scully and Mulder get onto the case, and so Detective Chow is there to help them out. Sin is maybe the main character that we ride this episode with, and we see that he's going to these, it almost feels like an auction-based, lottery-based type secret society we don't understand, as we learn more and more and more throughout, you begin to find out that what runs the lottery is this idea of your hopes is winning money. But if you lose, you got to lose an organ. Well, you can only lose so many organs before, your time is up. And so it is really a lottery. But his sin is, he's in it mainly because his daughter has leukemia and he fears that without the proper treatment, she'll die. And so he's sort of locked into this, what we find out actually ends up being a rigged system. And it's terrifying though, because one of the bodies, that ends up in the morgue on a table for Scully to look at, she finds out through an autopsy that these bodies have lost organs, and someone has surgically gone in and removed certain organs, and this sort of helps propel us towards the big reveal of what is actually happening. And Detective Chao seems to be not blind to what's going on, but he's also not hesitant until pushed by Mulder and Scully deeper into this to sort of face what's going on. Ultimately, he will, and when he does, he tries to be a hero, not without sacrifice, though. This was actually a really terrifying. This brings to mind things like, not necessarily, but I don't know, things like Saw, things like Collector, things like. In that sense, you're locked in almost sort of into a cult group and you can't get out. Once you're in, the rules forbid you to leave, or at least not without deadly consequence. And so, but those who are in charge of this thing, of course, they're making a racket. And ultimately, it's Detective Chao who ultimately, in the end, reveals that it's a fixed game, for anyone and everyone. And yet, in spite of that, even though they have the hard-faced man played by James Hong in custody, who seems to be a ringleader of sorts of this thing, no one who's involved in this, regardless or in spite of it being shown to be fixed, are stepping forward, which means ultimately in the end this guy's going to get off. And so it's kind of got a pretty morbid end in that sense, that there's no justice is going to be served. In fact, and this kind of brings me, the original Saw more than any of the sequels. The original Saw, and how things, or Dead Silence, how things trail around and how we see this reveal. It's just sort of those things reminded me of this. This movie aesthetically, man, it just got a much different vibe from last week's episode. Almost initially from the get-go, you feel like game's on, game is real. And it even has moments where it almost feels supernaturally inclined, but this may be a result of the amount of ancestor worship that is brought into the mix of the narrative here. You are dealing with those who have traveled far from China, who make up Chinatown's population, and this is happening, right? Those who end up in the cemetery oven, not good. The visuals are pretty stunning. It's funny because at the beginning of this episode, Scully is leaning towards cult, Mulder is leaning towards the supernatural, of course, ghostly activity. Ultimately, the truth of it ends up more on Scully's side in the end, as we find out. It is a cult of sort, for sure. And I'm just trying to, I mean, that's basically it. I mean, aside from some of the more specific scenes at play within, the threat always seems real, and you feel it from those characters who realize they're entrapped and they can't get out, or they're facing, and when you realize the gravity of some of these characters haven't gone through a series of having lost 2 or 3, 4 organs, and they're trapped within this thing. I don't know, there is something really, 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 really unnerving about that, and you can't escape it. Those in charge won't let you escape it. I don't know. This one was unbalanced. In a way, it was unnerving. But so it really raised the stakes quite a bit from last week's episode in terms of its, in terms of its overall narrative, its writing, just aesthetically looking at it, how it was shot. It was, wow, this was a good one. This was a good one. If you've never seen Hell Money, my wife and I mean, my wife was saying, we were watching it the other night, she was saying, I don't remember this. I do not remember this one at all. And I know we watch these things as they dropped every week, but then again, I was in the Army, and that could have been when I was out in the field. And I'm sure some of these episodes she probably would have not have watched by herself, alone in the apartment, of course, just her and our daughter. So, I mean, chances are we did miss a couple of these along the way as a result of me being in the Army and whatnot. But anyways, great episode, man. Great episode. Wow. Organ harvesting. Rooted in a lottery-based system, which there is no escape. Good episode, man. And those who were the guest characters, actors in here really brought it. Really good episode. Absolutely good. Again, to all those who are going to be reeling from this, the destructiveness of this storm, man, my prayers go out to each and every one of those families. Yeah, it's things aren't easy. As always, we always leave these songs off with Go Bills.
This is not a dream. Not a dream. We might be useful to you.